Wherever you are in the world, hello and welcome to THEOS Cybernova podcasts. Before we begin, I've got a quick favor to ask from you. There's one simple way that you could support our show, and that's by hitting the follow or subscribe buttons on the app that you're listening to the show on right now. It makes a huge difference in helping to get the show out there to as many people as possible. So please give us a hand and click that button now. Thank you very much.
The THEOS Cybernova podcast, hosted by Paul Jackson.
So, welcome to another episode of THEOS Cybernova podcast. I'm Paul Jackson, and each week we are digging into the latest trends, challenges, innovations that are shaping the cybersecurity landscape, as well as talking to a fantastic mix of leading industry experts, thought leaders, and technologists. So whether you're a professional in the field or simply curious about staying safe in the digital age, we hope that THEOS Cybernova will offer up valuable knowledge and actionable insights for everyone. So today, I'm delighted to welcome Nigel Phair to the show. Nigel is based down under in Australia, and like myself, started his career in law enforcement. I believe, Nigel, you also served almost 22 years as a cop with the Australia Federal Police, is that right?
That is correct, Paul.
Yeah, so pretty coincidental because I did just slightly under 22 years with the Hong Kong police. So really great to have you on the show. And of course, we met through our connections through Interpol back in the good old days when we were both fighting crime. But I made the decision afterwards to go into finance with banking, JP Morgan, I guess, for the money, but also, to expand my career. And then more recently, of course, I've been in the consulting world, and now I'm the CEO of THEOS Cyber. So what guided your decisions after leaving the police, and where are you now? Tell us a little bit about your story, Nigel.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Paul. Well, I think it's interesting. I might be fractionally biased, but, when you and I met, the word cyber wasn't even around, and that was well over 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's reminded me how old I am. Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah, I think you were a very young police officer for your time, but I did Australian High Tech Crime Centre again before it was called Cyber, and then went into the AFP's IT area for a couple of years, and I did a secondment to the Department of Defence. And at the end of that secondment, there was nothing really going for me in the AFP. There was no one saying, "Come and work on this great crime type and do X, Y, and Z." So I thought, I'm going to have a crack and test myself. And I resigned and went out and was working in a range of different roles, but primarily with my very good friend Alistair McGibbon. And I'd like to think, we're reasonably early pioneers at what is now known as trust and safety. And now everyone has a trust and safety person that works for them. Every organisation has some type of lead and body that does awareness. And I think our lack of success was mainly we tried to do it too early before it all became very popular.
So where did you take it from there, Nigel?
After doing that for a number of years, we were based at the University of Canberra. We were doing some teaching, we were doing some research into a whole range of different parts of the online environment. And then that was going quite well. And then we concluded our MOU, our commercial relationship with the University of Canberra, when there was a change of Vice-Chancellor. And then out of the blue, I got a call from the University of New South Wales and was asked to go and lead their cyber centre at the Australian Defence Force Academy. So I did that for nearly 5 years and was doing some other bits and pieces, consulting on the side, sat on some boards, did a lot of public speaking. We used to do a lot of media, still do a lot of media. Generally, most days there'll be a piece of media that'll come along. And one thing I've learned in that time with the media is the simpler it is, the more they like you.
100%. If you can distill something into, that's easily understood by the masses, then you've kind of halfway through winning the battle, aren't you?
Well, you are, and I think it's important, and I've gone away from sort of the snobbery value of doing breakfast TV, because that's where all the people are, and they still like you talking about passwords. So as much as I went through a stage of, I only wanted to do the highfalutin media stuff, is you've just got to go to where the people are, and you've got to. And there is a playbook for getting media, which I subsequently learned along the way. And when you've got research to release, or you just want to get some of your ideas out there, or you just want to be completely reactive to a large-scale data breach with what you think should have happened in the incident response, for example. Having that message for that outlet was exactly what you need to do. So I did the UNSW I still do a little bit for UNSW through their a little body in Sydney called SecEdu, which is a really important part of how do we get more students going through doing their cyber or related degree, software engineering, etc., Bachelor of ITs, and get them into the workforce. So we've been holding some yearly conferences. We had a really big student teams of 4 capture the flag in October last year, where we had 47 teams from across Australian universities have a go at a 4-week-long CTF. Pretty involved, pretty hard. And so we want to do more of that, and we talk to a whole range of industry about how do we get those people opportunities to get the smart young people into industry and solving the problems that we need solving. So I still do a bit of that. And then the rest of my days I work part-time at Monash University as a professor of cybersecurity there. I look after the Australia chapter of CREST, the Council of Registered Ethical Security Testers, which is a great not-for-profit out of the UK that's been going for a good 17, 18 years and is really, really ramping up with over 400 members globally to professionalise the industry, both the organisations and the people that work in it. And then I've been doing a bit of work for a US-based startup called Codex, which is a law enforcement liaison case management platform where policing can make inquiries of organisations.
That's interesting, and I'll talk to you in a moment about collaboration between the public and private sector, because I know it's a hot topic and one that's always discussed at various law enforcement conferences, etc. But let me talk to you a little bit about the university work that you're doing. What exactly do you teach? I mean, what's the theme of your lectures?
Well, I'm actually in a non-teaching role at the moment. But my main interaction with students, which is actually very enjoyable, is their integrated workplace learning packages. So we have a really good cohort of students. We have a really good cohort of industry that support those students. They go off for a semester and they do some actually deep dive meaningful work. And I get to follow the students through their journey, speak to them 3 times throughout the semester, beginning, middle, and end. Check in on them, make sure they're doing all right, make sure they're doing daily logs and weekly reflections and meaningful work, and getting them ready for their final, not just written assessment, but their oral assessment to their peers of how it was and what they've learned. And it's fascinating to what these young people can do. And when I wind back to when I was a 22-year-old, for example, and I joined the police at 22, there's no way I was that organised like some of these uni students are. They've really got their act together, and they're really going to contribute immensely to society, not just in cyber, but just generally.
Can I ask you about the nature of students? Because here where I am, obviously I'm up in the Southeast Asia part of our region, and there's always this challenge of getting the best and the brightest into cybersecurity because, there's kind of the old way of thinking that you make more money as a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, and therefore cybersecurity is perhaps lower in profile in attracting the best and the brightest. Is that the case in Australia, or do you see a difference there?
I see a difference because people acknowledge the value of a technology degree. Whether they actually take that into a cyber career is I think, the interesting thing. But one of the things I found the most interesting is, people that study cybersecurity often have a preset idea of what they want to do, and invariably it's the young guys that all want to be pen testers, for example, and then they get put in, and guys and girls, they get put into these roles with industry, and they get looked after well, and most of the time they don't get to choose what they want to do. And you'd be surprised how many people I talk to that are doing a GRC role, for example, and I go, didn't even know this existed, but I'm really liking it. Or they're doing code review, or they all just think they're going to be smashing IPs and hacking boxes, and it's all going to be cool. But they're doing a range of they realise there's paperwork they've got to do, and it's one thing writing code, but the other thing is writing secure code. And then the next thing after that is actually writing documentation about the code and what that app actually does and how it is under the hood. And it's fascinating talking to them as they go through that journey, because at the beginning they've got to write down what their goals are, and in the midterm placement they've got to revise their goals. And when you have the final discussion, you go, remember at the beginning you said you thought you were going to achieve this, and now you have achieved something completely different. They're just like blown away with how it is. And you'd be surprised how many of them get offered jobs afterwards, because these people go, this is just a 6-month-long job interview. I want you to stay because you're awesome.
Yeah, interesting. But you just gave me a good lead in as well to a key question when you talk about guys and gals. I mean, are you seeing the balance become a little bit better in terms of encouraging women in cyber?
Significantly.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, no, it is good. There's a lot of work that's being done globally, but also in Australia. We have the Australian Women Security Network and a range of other not-for-profit groups which are getting out to high schools and sort of saying to people, I still think we've got a long way to go to really get it, but particularly for technical careers. I think it's giving girls that confidence that they can be technical if they want to, rather than it's the guys of the pen testers or whatever it might be. And also, I think the big thing is explaining all the different types of cyber careers that you can have in your one cyber career.
Indeed. Well, we at THEOS, we've just hired one of the best female pen testers, red teamers that I know of in the region, and it's so encouraging to see that sort of talent emerging. She's a real prospect for the future, and we're really proud to have her on the team. So I guess whilst I don't see Southeast Asia as being, the gap narrowing anytime soon, I think we're definitely seeing signs of improvement. But it's really encouraging to hear that Australia is kind of leading the march on this.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going globally with numbers, but we're definitely getting there, because it's one thing getting the smart young things through university. We've still also got to work at mid-career people as well. And I'm a firm believer that there's a cyber career for everyone at whatever stage you are in, whatever career you're in. If you can apply that, whatever thinking that you've come from, you can apply it to, whether it's threat intelligence or trying to solve problems or incident response or these sorts of things. And that's where I think it comes down to, we're still not very good at explaining what a career in cybersecurity actually means.
Yeah, well said. I think you're absolutely right there, and it's something I've tried very hard. Back in the days of JP Morgan, I tried to get the teams to interact more, not be in silos. So the investigators interacting more with the pen testers, because who better to try and understand or unravel what the hacker might have done in the environment than an ethical hacker themselves, right? And work closely with the DFIR team, the forensics folks, to try and just tell a story.
Yeah, and I think that's super important, because as we know, it's trite to say that they're solving business problems. They're not technical problems they're solving. We're trying to keep businesses and governments functioning. We're trying to make them more resilient to cyber attacks. So I think getting people from a range of different business areas and talking to these people, say, actually, this is what our mission is. It's a business mission. We're not trying to secure a network. We're trying to secure a business or an organization. And that's still got a lot of work in progress to do.
Right. So, you talked about your journey from the public sector into the private sector. That happens a lot, doesn't it? How is Australia doing about retaining talent in government? Because we're seeing Hong Kong, Singapore, other places around our region, the Philippines, unfortunately, companies like ourselves are hiring the most talented people from government. How's Australia doing?
Yeah, I think we're doing okay, but at best okay. No better or no worse than anywhere else. And I think going back to when we created the Australian High Tech Crime Centre in 2002, back then we couldn't compete with salaries from call it the Big Four consulting firms. There were hardly any generalised cyber consulting firms, but the Big Four were doing mainly incident response. And I think what government needs to do is much, much better on the sales pitch, because people would go off to the Big Four, particularly for it was called digital forensics back then, wasn't really incident response, even that's what they were doing. And all of a sudden they realised it's all about the billables. They weren't getting any training. They never went to a conference. They never got to play it's all about getting out there. And sure, they doubled their salary, but they didn't particularly, many of them didn't enjoy the work. And all we could do at the time was we were contracted to Dell for laptops. So we would buy people the most expensive Dell laptop that you could. We would spend $5,000 on something with virtually no memory. And not much in the way of software. That and whenever the latest Nokia mobile phone came out, we'd buy one of that for all the team because we couldn't compete on salary. But we gave people lots of cool training. We gave them lots of opportunities to go to a conference and speak, or go overseas and meet with their peers, or do a whole range of things. And that's really valuable, I think, for people at all stages of their career. And I don't think government globally, I think they rest on their laurels. And the other thing they need to also better explain to people is, I think it doesn't matter how cool your consulting company is and how cool you think the stuff you do is. Once you get a security clearance and you're working in government, you are working against the best cyber criminals.
Yes,
and you're doing at the highest levels with the coolest equipment and the coolest partners. And that's the other thing that the public sector has got to better explain to people. If you want to learn to hack, this is where you learn to hack. This is, and the people you're doing it against. It's pretty much all out in the open now. All major, particularly Western governments, are all saying that there's active defence, for want of a better nomenclature. So if you want to do the cool stuff, you go to government, and I think it's great. What we're not good at, and I think you're going to lead to this anyway, is transitioning those people into the private sector. And it kind of pains me to say this, the US probably do it the best, where when you leave government and you go to the private sector, you're not dead to people.
Right.
Whereas in Australia, in a lot of other places I've seen, you struggle to chat again with your ex-work colleagues in a meaningful way because they think you've sold your soul. And I think that's a real shame because the government can't solve all the problems. That's why they bring in consultancies like you guys to help them. That's the reality. So they should be acknowledging that. I think just because you've left government, you haven't left the mandate that is securing the nation's critical infrastructure.
I think you've just made a really important point there because even when I left the police here, I felt like a bit of a turncoat, a traitor to the rest of the guys. And so because I lived in US for a while when I was with JP Morgan, and obviously JP Morgan's full of former US law enforcement guys, and I could see the big difference. I could see exactly what you just said. They were still interacting with their colleagues, and you're right. I think they set the bar very high over there in terms of those relationships. Now, I was just at a Interpol working party meeting for Asia Pacific region. I was invited to go there just a couple of months ago. It was actually held in Manila, and I attended that. And it had been 24 years since my first working party meeting. And do you know what? The topics were still very, very similar, sad to say.
Haven't quite moved on?
No. A lot of it's around the need for the public-private partnerships, which you brought up earlier in this conversation, and how we're still not succeeding in that. And I don't know. Do you have any answers? How do we improve the public-private partnerships?
Yeah. Well, it's all culture, I think, is what it is. So firstly, as we've just discussed, it's acknowledging that just because you've left government doesn't mean that you're still not, focused on the mission that is, protecting a nation's piece of critical infrastructure. I think that's the first piece of culture. The second one is the government people, and you and I probably didn't know this either when we were in government, and no one told us, that the private sector is gold, completely different to the government. And, it is about the billables. And if you're listed, it's about earnings per share per quarter. And, if you're in a consulting business, it is about having a certain percentage of billable hours. And that's just how it is. And I think that's the next step where the culture falls down, is that there's a different aspect or a different way of looking almost at every meeting. And it's not always brutally commercial, but people get it wrong on both sides. We had many vendors at the AFP that would come along in the early days and want to give us a whole lot of free stuff. And then they'd get upset when they didn't win a tender for say, the antivirus for the whole network of the AFP, because they thought, oh, well, we've given, a whole lot of dongles of incident response forensics, whatever, to people. So why didn't we get that? And so I think on both sides of the coin, there's a lot of lessons. How we bring that together is again, it's just, I think, working on the culture, but acknowledging that everyone's got a role to play. I think also universities can come into it to the extent, and obviously I get paid to say that.
Yeah, right.
Can just in case my vice chancellor is listening, but they can come into the extent that when I've looked through Europe, there's a lot of people in industry that have adjunct professor and similarships with universities, and they're widely acknowledged. So I think there's a bit of a bridge along the way. I think we should be getting universities, maybe not in the middle because that'll just blur things. So they have exactly a similar thing. They have their own goals and cultures and everything. But I think it's acknowledging that everyone can do something different. I think it's, we have problems with people getting security clearances once they've left.
Mm.
That's another issue. I've been lucky. I've had along the way enough consulting opportunities back into government where there's been a department that says, yes, we will retain a clearance for you so you can come and talk about certain things with us. But there's a lot of people that would have, a good story. You guys through your network probably see an awful lot of things that some other people don't. Yet in some governments may or may not want to hear that for various reasons. Mm. So I blame doesn't lie anywhere, but the improvement lies everywhere of just chipping away and joining up. I think it's security clearances. I think it's bringing people in. It's de-lawyering it. We have our Australian Cybersecurity Centre. In each capital city, we have what's called the JCSC, Joint Cybersecurity Centre. I think it's a brilliant idea where business can come in, but that's only brilliant to the extent that if a business can come in and talk to government about what they're seeing on a two-way dialogue, if you don't make it overly onerous for the NDA that's got to be signed when it goes to the in-house lawyers, and they just go, we're not signing this because we're not sharing it and we've just got some brand new legislation late November last year, where the government doesn't have to or can't give information shared to the regulators. So the lawyering side of it, rightly or wrongly, still got a long way to play out to join this all up. But the sharing of threat intelligence would be a great way, and it is a great way. It's happening. Having said that, there's a lot of organisations that technically can't receive threat intelligence because they actually don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think you touched on the legal side of things, and you're absolutely right. That one of the challenges, and I know that from from my own experience and from talking to folks who are in-house, is that they are kind of shackled. Companies are risk averse and they don't want to engage in sharing because of potential fear of reputational damage or leaks coming out of law enforcement. Let's face it, we've seen multiple instances where law enforcement themselves have been responsible for leaks. So I guess it's all that one word, isn't it? Trust, and that's what we haven't really got to.
I think it is, but we've still got to address that whole legal issue because there's a number of prominent law firms who have set up big cyber incident response practices, particularly on the back of national legislation. We have data breach legislation. Most advanced jurisdictions now do. It's now becoming a more of a headline in the boardroom. Mm. And I think that the easy knee-jerk response from a group of company directors is, I want more legal advice, not less.
Right. And by the way, you're throwing me some real easy ones here because you're leading into the next questions beautifully, because I wanted to talk about governance and boards. But let's start off with your book, right? Because you've actually written a book.
There's 5 of them.
There's 5 of them now, is there? Gosh, all New York Times bestsellers?
Number 1 with a bullet.
There you go. So what made you decide to start writing in the first place?
Oh, maybe it's the wannabe academic in me. It's interesting. So I wrote my first one back in 2006 called Cybercrime, the Reality of the Threat. And it's funny when I now look back at that book and some of the predictions I made. Luckily, phishing is still going because I said, well, one of my big things, phishing is going to be huge. And then I'm trying to get them all in an order now. I wrote Cybercrime, the challenge for the legal profession. I think about 2010, I wrote Technology for Company Directors, because I used to do a lot of in-boardroom briefings, a lot. That was like for a little while, almost a full-time job in between the two university engagements. Then the last one is on incident response and what it means for responders. And I'm no psychologist, but I tipped on that. But the one before that in the middle was we had our Australian Cybercrime Act come out in 2001. So I always envisaged I'd write one on the 20th anniversary. So I wrote Cybercrime in Australia, 20 years of inaction back in 2021. Nice. And, I was lucky I had a researcher that helped me with that. But we looked at a lot of case studies and, we did surveys of people. We looked at legislation. We looked at a whole range of different things. And, law enforcement, unfortunately, just doesn't do anywhere enough.
No, it doesn't. But I think, anybody who served quite a number of years in law enforcement automatically gets the title of psychologist, because it's part and parcel of the job, right? But
particularly if you want people to talk at interview.
Correct, yes. But look, you focus, one of your focuses was on governance, and boards. But you said you used to do board briefings. You don't do so many anymore. What's changed?
Two things changed. One is I went sort of full time with you at the University of New South Wales. But the second one, and it's an interesting one, is I used to charge for it.
Uh-huh.
And then once it got to be a fashionable thing, your particularly Big Four type consultants who would come along and, inverted commas, offer it for free, and except they'd be trying to sell about $300,000 of consulting services out the back end, whereas I'd come along and say, I'm going to give it to you straight between the eyes. We're going to talk about the threat environment. We're going to talk about control frameworks. We're going to talk about risk. We're going to talk about all these juicy things at a high level under the the umbrella of governance, of strategy and risk, what we're doing. And boards were good fun to talk to, but what I used to like even more was actually talking to a risk and audit committee. And you had these people, particularly with the big organisations, your big, stock market listed companies, who are at the top of their game. And for some unknown reason, you put the word cyber in a sentence and they go weak at the knees. And I'd say to these people, from a risk perspective, we are doing nothing different than what you do to manage other risk, whether it's financial risk or work health and safety risk or a range of other risks. It's just we're going to, do it sounds trite, but we're going to do a risk assessment. We're going to look at a number of scenarios. We're going to come up with a control framework. We're going to implement it. We're going to measure it. We're going to monitor it. And, you're going to make an investment. And that's how it is. Putting it into practice, obviously, a little bit more work. But I was there just to be the evangelist, not to actually say, and by the way, here's my rate card. I'll help you do that. I'll help you get yourself 27,001.
That's a very cynical approach, but very accurate, I would say. But now I'm not going to annoy all my many friends in Big Four by echoing what you.
I could like to know. It was business development for them.
Indeed.
I don't begrudge them anything. Their holy grail was to do the presentation and to get an intro to the CISO. I get it.
So are you seeing any changes, any improvements in this regard? Because I literally an hour and 39 minutes ago, I just wrapped up a board briefing with an organization who take it very seriously. And you could tell they actually wanted, they wanted information. They wanted to be able to make the best judgment decisions they possibly could based on, facts and figures and clear information. Because ultimately, a board is responsible for governance, managing risk, etc. And unless they know all about cyber, how can they govern and manage cyber risk? So, are you seeing? I'm seeing definitely an improvement in Asia. I think they want to take it seriously. They want real information rather than just ticking a box and getting somebody in who'll do it for free, but price you pay is a bit of sales talk. Are you seeing that the trend is changing at all? Are boards and executives taking it perhaps a little bit more seriously than they used to?
Well, yes and no. So I think they want to take it seriously. There's certainly more broad briefings and those things. Our peak body, the Australian Institute of Company Directors, have had for a number of years courses for directors, and I believe they're quite popular. When they do their yearly members briefing, they always talk about cybersecurity. When they have their annual conference, there's always a cybersecurity speaker there. But so there's a lot of interest. Where I think it goes wrong is on a multitude of levels. So if we start from boards perspective, particularly when you get to your big ASX listed boards, I'm a firm believer that most people sit on too many boards, and they're really not deep dive across the business and particularly the technology. So when you talk to them, they've read a book or they've read some magazine articles, and it's one of those, a little bit of information knowledge is dangerous. But when you say to them, do you know what your information assets are? Do you know what your technology assets are? And I'm not saying that, as you said, their governance, their risk, their strategy, they're not to get into the weeds. But they're actually clueless to how technology heavy their organisations are. And when I've done a review, I actually did a paper about a bit over 2 years ago on the company directors in the ASX 100. And now out of that, there's about 707 positions filled by about 600 people. And we just basically looked at the bio that they have on their website and their LinkedIn profile. Out of those 600 people, I think there was 3 that said they knew about cyber. This is just people that self-declared that they knew about it, sort of stuff. So you've got virtually, and I've spoken to headhunters, and I said, do the boards actually want someone with cyber experience on their board? And they go, no, not at all. They want to get the same monoculture that they've always had. They want to have an ex-managing partner from a law firm, an ex-consultant from a Big Four, an ex-lawyer, an ex-accountant, and this whole diversity on board. Sure, they might get a different nationality, or they might get a female to replace a male and pat themselves on the back. But it's all for nothing, because it's exactly the same skill set they keep bringing in. They replace one lawyer with another lawyer. So I think from that perspective, we've got a long, long way to go. Then, if we Google questions board directors should ask about cyber, we get pages of the stuff. So there's one thing saying these are the questions to ask, but they don't know what answers to receive.
That's true.
And that's where it falls over. It's like, do we have a control framework? Yes or no? And the answer might be yes, we are SOC 2, or we've got, NIST, or we've got 27,001, but that's a meaningless answer. And they can go, oh, tick, we've accredited to 27,001. Okay, but what part of the network? Is it the CRM? Is it, the this? Is it something that's really critical? Why was that chosen? They just don't know these subsequent deep dive questions to ask. And because so many of them are overboarded, you look at, and when we went through all these CVs, there's people sitting on 4 and 5 boards. There's no way they can be across everything. And then when someone comes along like me and goes, oh, now I'm going to talk cyber, and they're going, oh my God, we've just had a whole day of board presentations, and now you want me to concentrate on this? That's where that failure is from that side. From the other side, from the people delivering it, I'm kind of a bit tired of everyone dooming and glooming it. And I really don't enjoy when I go to a conference or go anywhere and people trot out that it's not a matter of if you get hacked, it's when. And people just switch off. I've seen it. People just go, oh, well, it's all over. What's the point? Rather than go, let's have a conversation about how it goes back to what I mentioned before about being a resilient organization. Here's some of the things you can do, because as a consultant, you're bringing people in to sort of, fix something that may or may not have happened. So trying to explain to people, this is what we're trying to do and this is the why. There's too much of, nation states just going to smash the insides out of you. There's nothing you can do. So whatever.
Defeatist already. I hear you.
It's the same, and it's the same when they give personal advice of the old, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Well, all the people who have suffered scams didn't think it was too good to be true. They don't go telling people, it's like we say people don't click on links. I click on links all day. So we give this advice out in these presentations, and we really need to rethink how we do it.
I think you've made some really good points. I think I'll have to invite you back for another session where we just focus purely on boards and governance and the mistakes that are being made, because it's a fascinating topic. But I do want to cover another quick couple of questions before we close up for today. Why is it Australia seems to have a large number of cyber incidents? Is it just because they're more transparent, more publicized?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there is a degree of transparency, probably helped by the media, rightly or wrongly. And some organisations have used the media better than others. Some of them have used their government relations better than others. But we do have a lot. There is certainly no hiding away from it. According to our Australian Signals Director, that just on their platform where you can report cybercrime, which the vast majority of people have never heard of, there's a report every 8 minutes.
Wow.
So, and I reckon that's about 1/5 of what there are. Now, we could debate the definition of a cyber incident, of course. But, I think we're a pretty rich jurisdiction. We're pretty connected. Maybe we just don't have the best security going around. I couldn't put my finger on any one thing, but we're definitely up there with the top of the pops.
Yeah, no, for sure, and
we're payers of ransomware too. That's the other thing. It's another. When we're up to podcast number 7 between you and I, we'll get onto the vagaries of paying or not paying ransomwares.
Oh, what a great topic that is as well. And obviously you're one of the ransomware gang's best customers down there in Australia.
Well, we are. We pay up. Yep. Yep. So why not keep their business model going?
I'm also going to talk to you on a future chat, because I've loved this chat, and I'm going to get back to you on a few of these things, because I do want to talk to you about the cybersecurity market in Australia as well, because we as a consulting firm, not headquartered in Australia, found challenges breaking into the market because it seems to be relationship driven rather than ability driven. Maybe I'm being a bit unfair there. I don't know, but does that perhaps lead to a lack of global perspective in the marketplace down there?
Yeah, well, I'm sure your big 4 consulting firms would argue they bring global perspective, but really they've just got local teams run by local partners. They're just SMEs at the end of the day. We've got 1 or 2 big firms, and then we've got a lot of little 10 to 20 man shops, sort of stuff.
That's right.
Some that just do a boutique service, like say threat intelligence or pen testing or code review or whatever, or GRC. Some that will do end-to-end the full function. Yeah, I think it is very relationship driven. I think we have pretty good capability. Mind you could argue when we're just discussing about how many incidents we have, maybe the capability isn't so good. I don't know enough about other markets to know how hard it is to crack into them, but I think you guys should move down here. I think lots of organisations should. We went through a phase of sovereignty. I don't know if that's still really such a buzzword anymore, because people are happy to buy everything from, say a Microsoft or whatever. So I think it's probably the compelling argument. I don't know enough about the market to how the pie's grown dramatically I'd say even the last 5 years.
Right.
New entrants have come along, and they haven't really taken other people's work. They've just grown with more organisations. So whether you sort of take a sectorial approach, particularly with critical infrastructure protection, we've got some laws around that. I'd have to give it some more thought on a go-to-market, why there's not so many internationals.
Right. Let's save that then for the next chat, along with a drill into the board briefings, because I've loved this conversation with you, Nigel, and it's great to reconnect. It's been so many years since we last met up. Way too many years, and we're overdue a cold one, aren't we? But I always close the THEOS Cybernova podcast by asking my guests, because I'm a music lover, right? I really, it offsets the stress of work, I guess, and also it's just a hobby of mine, collecting vinyl and stuff. So, what are you currently listening to? What floats your boat at the moment, Nigel?
Oh, well, I don't listen to the specific artists. I will have on Apple Music. I do have some various playlists which I'll put on, some that go through genres. some that are old, I still love the old Australian stuff of Midnight Oil and all those that sort of 80s.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So I've got a playlist of that. I've got a playlist of R&B stuff that's really quite new. I don't mind the beats. I don't mind the old 70s disco stuff. I've got various playlists, and then sometimes I'll just put it on, random.
I've got this vision of you now, Nigel, in your Saturday Night Fever gear, giving it large.
Absolutely. Let me go to the wardrobe and I'll pull out the sequined suit.
Fantastic. Look, Nigel, thank you so much for giving up your time and being a guest on the show today, and look forward to having further conversations with you down the line as we continue this series of podcasts. Okay.
And congratulations for you for doing something like this, Paul. I think it's great to get some ideas out there.
Thank you so much, Nigel. So, THEOS Cybernova was presented by myself, Paul Jackson. The studio engineer and editor was Roy DeMonte. The executive producer was myself and Ian Carlos. And this podcast is a co-production between THEOS Cyber and W4 Podcast Studio.
The THEOS Cybernova podcast.